Hey guys, I just wanted to hop on and film or record a video really quick for those of you that haven't been able to make the Google Hangouts or any of the Hangouts for that matter. Starting with Unit 2 and 3, I'm going to kind of blow through this as not quickly as possible, but pretty quick because I think I have like a 30-minute limit, and I know you guys don't want to watch me talk to myself for any length near 30 minutes. So, a couple of the really important things, and you should be able to see this so you can kind of just cover from there. A direct democracy is those participating directly, so that's you, like you going, making a law, and it becoming a bill when your other peers vote on it. Indirect democracy is what most of us are used to. We elect somebody, they go and represent our interests or beliefs or any of that jazz, and then it goes forward from there. Political socialization, how we have our internal political lens, what events, what livelihood, nature versus nurture, whatever you want to call it, brought us to that level. Unicameral versus bicameral. Unicameral, you can see it on my screen. One house, that should say house. One house versus two houses. A couple of the states that have two houses are the United Kingdom. Russia has two houses. Iran has two houses. Mexico has two houses. China, it's not really, but also yes, depending upon where you're talking about. If you're talking about the party, then yes, they do have two houses. If you're talking about the People's Congress, if you want to include the Central Committee, Standing Committee, and the Politburo as legislative arms and not party arms, which they are in between, then it gets murky. Okay, so all right. Heads of state, a role that symbolizes and represents the people, embodying and articulating the goals of the regime. Head of state would be the Ayatollah. Head of state would be the monarchy in the United Kingdom. The president of Russia, the president of China, the president of Mexico. Those are dual executive roles, especially when you look at like Mexico, or not Mexico, Russia and China. Those are both heads of state and heads of government, even though it says on paper that they aren't. Then you have the prime minister, you have parliament. Those are just executive titles, okay? All right, so a parliamentary system combines the lawmaking and executive functions, allows the national legislature to select and remove the head of government and the cabinet. Parliamentary systems: United Kingdom, the European Union, Nigeria, sort of. Um, it started as a parliamentary system. Then now it's a presidential system, sort of like semi-presidential. Um, China is a parliament. Russia has a parliament. Iran is, I guess you could stretch it, not really, but a little bit. Um, Presidential system, a cabinet that is mostly responsible to the elected executive. They can only remove those members through impeachment. Separate fixed term elections, popular elections for the national legislatures, and a top executive serving as both head of state and head of government. Again, presidential systems that we've studied: Russia, China, Iran, Nigeria, Mexico. The United Kingdom is a parliamentary system entirely, but they have that presidential thesis, the presidentialization theory. That's what happens when a prime minister slowly accrues or gains more and more power each subsequent year that they're in office, and each subsequent prime minister gets stronger and stronger. Semi-presidential system. Now that is a popular election for the president and national legislature, but then the president nominates the prime minister. So Russia, okay. Same with China a little bit, because Xi Jinping, even though he's the head of the government, he's also the head of the party, and to be high up in the government, you have to be high up in the party. To get high up in the party, you have to be basically vetted at every single level, and then just keep going up each level. Differences of a presidential democracy. So that would be the closest thing that we would see. How do I want to think about that? In a parliamentary democracy. So basically, in a presidential democracy, the main difference between these two things is a presidential democracy. The legislative arm is not connected to the executive arm. The executive arm in a parliamentary democracy is the ruling member or ruling party of the legislative arm. So that's the major difference that you would ever get a question on. All right, so then confederal, unitary, and federal system. So federal system, the powers have not delegated all the power to the national government. So that's our system. Um, that is, what else could that be? Definitely the United States. Um, maybe Iran. And maybe a little bit of the United Kingdom. Confederal, sovereign states delegate power to a central government for a specific purpose. That would be Russia. There's specific states that are more important in Russia, specific states that are not important. And then there's unitary. Central government acts directly on the citizen. That's China. Okay? Independent judiciaries. What's the point? So the purpose is to have a judiciary that is independent from the executive and legislative branch. You don't want a judicial branch that is going to support the executive branch without ever questioning it. That's why a lot of independent election committees and independent judiciaries are being minimized or delegitimized in these like failing or failed or weaker states. So you want to really avoid this just complete carte blanche by the executive branch or some overruling supreme leader Ayatollah type figure that is going to just completely throw out any and all rule of law. How much power does each judiciary branch have? I go into that a little bit more in depth. China is pretty strong. It has to be in accordance with the Chinese Communist Party state. It's a panel of judges, the Supreme Court, and really all court systems for that matter. And it's a very simple majority to determine a court case. That's why they have a 99% conviction rate. The European Court of Justice, pretty strong, but it's again, that's you, the states, entering into a confederal system, giving up certain powers to the ECJ, the European Court of Justice, to enact policies or to enforce law cases or adjudicate law that's occurred in all 28 member nation states. All right, term limits. Why are these important? Fixed term limits. So China, the ruler Xi Jinping, no term limit, 5-year renewable term. They used to have an age limit. They got rid of it. Doesn't exist anymore. It used to be 65. Xi is coming up on that. They've removed that most recently in 2018. Russia, one consecutive term, 6 years, no limit. So it's one term as president, then one term as prime minister. That's what Putin has basically been doing since 1999 when he took over after Yeltsin. In 99, Putin was both the president and prime minister when Yeltsin resigned going into the election of 2000. There are no limits. He actually just removed them this January. He had the entire prime minister and the prime minister's cabinet resign. A new guy came in, Mikhail, I don't want to slaughter his last name. New guy came in, and he's towing the party line. He's doing everything Putin wants, and that's why Putin now, we could probably see Putin in charge of Russia for 20, 30, 40 years, 20 years, 20 to 30 years. He's 60. He's in his 60s, so 40 years is a little bit of a stretch. Nigeria, 4 years, renewable once. Olusegun Obasanjo is the only president to ever last 2 terms. Mexico, it is a 6-year, one-term limit. It's called a sexenio. At the start of a Mexican president, the entire Mexican judicial system, the Supreme Court, they're all brand new. So when you think about legitimacy and think about trusting the Mexican courts, when the Supreme Court is beholden to the brand new president, you're really going to see a pretty corrupt state. They're not going to adjudicate on any type of corruption laws that are counter to what the state wants. And we saw that under Vicente Fox and then again under Enrique Peña Nieto. The United Kingdom, you are the prime minister at will of the ruling party. As long as your party controls the House of Commons, you're in charge. Sorry. As long as you're in charge of the House, you have the majority or you form some type of coalition government, most recently the Conservative Party and the Lib Dems, then it doesn't matter. Like, done. Now, you can lose the party confidence, and that happened to Theresa May. She had 2 votes of no confidence placed against her, defeating both of them, but realistically understanding that she needed to resign. Iran, it's a 4-year, 2 consecutive term. Right now, the president is Hassan Rouhani. It used to be this guy named Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, who hated the United States, who hated Israel. So we had a lot of problems with him when he was president. Hassan Rouhani, we're still trying to learn each other's policies as well as we can. The Ayatollah is in power for life. He is the head of state. Hassan Rouhani is the head of government, but the Ayatollah is quasi ahead of both. He is not able. The president Hassan Rouhani is not able to do anything without the Ayatollah's say. All right, so now we're going to get into the EU Commission president. It's 5 years for a term. They're renewable. Then there's a bunch of those other different little EU offices where they all rotate. Some states have it for 6 months. Some states have it for this, that. So that always changes. Parliamentary system. The executive titles within a parliamentary system are Prime Minister, President. When we think about China, the General Secretary of the CCP, the President of the PRC, which is the same person, and then the Premier of the CCP. So the parliamentary regimes that we talk about most are the United Kingdom, Russia, and China. The executive powers that they have, I go into individually. Nominations to the Prime Minister, as long as you're the ruling member of your party or you have the highest moral standing or good standing within the party that's nominated you, then you're set. Parliamentary majority, that's really simple. We like you guys know how to figure that out. And then plurality, that's the majority of the minority. So that would be like 40%. That would be 37%. Whatever the highest number is, that still is below the majority. That is when you look at a plurality, and that's when a coalition government would possibly be formed. How do you become a member of parliament? There's a couple different ways. There's direct election. So that's what we have. We vote for our senators. We vote for who represents Long Islanders. Or there's proportional majority voting, which is where you're basically voting for a political party, and then they'll put their candidates up as who won the seat. All right, so that's a little bit different. Now, the United Kingdom, Prime Minister, term limits. So the powers that they have, term limits we already went over. The powers that they have, they're the head of government in the United Kingdom. So what they are doing is making sure that the Queen's government and the United Kingdom government is following whatever policies and procedures that the House of Commons has put into place, right? So the Prime Minister works directly with the legislative branch because he is a part of the legislative branch. He's not an individual executive role. The cabinet, he has about 17 different cabinet members behind him. And then there's a shadow government and a shadow cabinet, and that currently is led by Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party. Okay, the executor of Treasury, the Secretary of the Czech, he's in charge of budgetary matters. He works with the Prime Minister. They're on the same side. They're not trying to, play political games against each other. And then the connection to the Queen, she basically does nothing. She's the head of state. She's basically a figurehead, purely a ceremonial role. She comes out, she gives a little speech once a year. Great time, good accent, but that's about it. Okay. So there's 2 legislative houses in the House or in the United Kingdom. It's the House of Commons, which is what we've talked about the most, and then there's the House of Lords. House of Lords is figuratively a ceremonial position. It used to be purely hereditary, but they got rid of that idea because people just weren't maintaining the estates to be quote-unquote a lord of an estate. It cost too much money. So then they started letting in randoms. Like David Beckham is a member. Paul McCartney is a member. I think Elton John is a member. It's just randoms that finally got let in. They have some political sway. The only thing that they can really do is delay a legislative financial bill for up to 30 days for renegotiation or reevaluation. The House of Commons is where the power is. House of Commons is just as similar as our Senate and our House of Representatives, just bundled together. They're in charge of putting up any type of legislative bills involving money, budgetary measures, education, the NHS, military spending, declaration of war, coronavirus, coverage right now, state of emergency. That would be left up to the Queen to announce.